Biafra launched a scheme called Back to Land, which propagated the planting of all sorts of crops, an increase in the production of chicken and egg, extensive fish farming, salt production from seawater, etc. But as the war progressed, these measures became inadequate for the needs of both the military and civilian populations. Gradually, Biafra began to lose even the farming territories to the invading Nigerian army. As the rural areas fell, refugees flocked to the center of Biafra, exacerbating the famine. Thus, by May 1968, starvation was almost at its peak. Biafran propaganda on the issue of starvation also heightened, whilst Lagos was determined to play it down. Biafran children who nearly starved to death during the war as a result of Chief Obafemi Awolowo's starvation policy. It censored every information emanating from Biafra. The 200 Christian missionary groups in Biafra were the first to react to this aspect of Biafra's message and responded immediately. They were to play a key role in attracting the world's attention to the ever-increasing volumes of Biafra's starving children, especially, and women and men generally. Humanitarian suffering, especially starvation, were severe as a result of the Gowon-led government's blockade of Biafra. Pictures of starving and malnourished children went around the world. The FMG was widely seen as indulging in atrocities and attacks against civilians, including apparently indiscriminate airstrikes in an increasingly brutal war in which civilians were the chief victims. With federal forces in control by media of Port Harcourt, the most important southern coastal city, British officials noted that, having gone thus far in supporting the Gowon-led government, it would be a pity to throw away the credit we have built up with them just when they seem to have the upper hand. Britain could not halt the supply of arms since, apart from other considerations, such an outcome would seriously put at risk about £200 million of British investments in non-Biafra Nigeria. George Thompson explained to Harold Wilson. Harold Wilson did not succumb to public pressure. The following month, he told Gowon that the British government, for their part, have steadfastly maintained their policy of support for federal Nigeria and have resisted all suggestions in Parliament and in the press for a change in that policy, particularly in regard to arms supplies. The Foreign Office argued that the whole of our investments in Nigeria, and particularly our oil interests in the Southeast and the Midwest, will be at risk if we change our policy of support for the federal government. British arms supplies were stepped up again in November. Foreign Secretary Michael Stewart said the Nigerians could have 5 million more rounds of ammunition, 40,000 more mortar bombs, and 2,000 rifles. You may tell Gowon, Stewart instructed High Commissioner Hunt in Lagos that we are certainly ready to consider a further application to supply similar arms in the future as well. He concluded, if there is anything else for ground warfare which you think they need and which would help speed up the end of the fighting, please let us know and we will consider urgently whether we can supply it. Other supplies agreed in November following meetings with the Nigerians included 6 Saladins and 20,000 rounds of ammunition for them, and stepped up monthly supplies of ammunition amounting to a total of 15 million rounds additional to those already agreed. It was recognized by the Defense Minister that the scale of the UK supply of small arms ammunition to Nigeria in recent months has been and will continue to be on a vast scale. The recent deal meant that Britain was supplying 36 million rounds of ammunition in the last few months alone. Britain's willingness to supply very large quantities of ammunition, Lord Shepherd noted, meant drawing on the British Army's own supplies. At the same time, the Foreign Office was instructing its missions around the world to lie about the extent of this arms supply. By the end of 1968, Britain had sold Nigeria £9 million worth of arms, £6 million of which was spent on small arms. A quarter of Nigeria's supplies by value had come from the Soviet Union, also taking advantage of the war for its own benefit and trying no doubt to secure an opening into Nigeria provided by this opportunity. British officials consistently justified their arms supply by saying that if they stopped, the Russians would fill the gap. It was Britain's oil interest, however, that was a dominating factor in Whitehall planners' reasoning. By the last 2 months of 1968, with millions dead by now, the fighting had reached a stalemate. The Gowon-led government had taken all Biafran territory apart from a small enclave within it consisting of 3 million people in an area the size of Kent. Biafrans were now dependent on 2 airstrips for outside supplies, which were limited by both Gowon's and Ojukwu's refusals to allow sufficient number of aircraft to land. Humanitarian agencies were continuing calls for a ceasefire as suffering, especially starvation, had reached crisis proportions. We shall continue to maintain our present policy despite these heavy pressures on us, Wilson told Gowon in November. Biafran resistance ended by mid-January 1970. Wilson then sent another message to Gowon saying that your army has won a decisive victory and has achieved your great aim of preserving the unity and integrity of Nigeria, adding, as you know, I and my colleagues have believed all along that you were right and we have never wavered in our support for you. Your government and your policy, despite the violent attacks which have been made on us at times in Parliament and in the press as well as overseas. The Deputy High Commissioner in Lagos added, there is genuine gratitude, as indeed there should be, for what Britain has done and is still doing for this country, and in particular for Her Majesty's government's courage in literally sticking to their guns over Biafra. The Biafran economy was shattered, cities were in ruins, and schools, hospitals, and transport facilities destroyed. This was how, with the help of Harold Wilson and the British government, the Nigerian forces led by General Yakubu Gowon violated the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and to add salt to injury, there were no war trials or sanctions as regards to the blatant use of starvation, massacre, and biowarfare against innocent civilians as a method of subjugation by the Gowon-led government.